Hello Crazyhouse fans from all around the world. This is Mugwort from Australia and I'm doing my first ever streaming. So it's very exciting to get started in this field. I'm actually used to teaching children at schools, and so it feels very strange to be talking just to a computer screen, but we'll see how it goes. And I have to say I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing when it comes to streaming or recording. I'm a total noob, so bear with me while I get used to this format. So for my first ever recording, I'd actually like to go back to the chess.com championship for 2018, which was held on Thursday the 22nd of February, which was 5 a.m. the next morning in Sydney time, Australia. And as far as I know, there were 3 Aussies competing. So myself, John Lee Crazyhouse, and Master Tan Crazyhouse. So we all had to get up extremely early, and of course there were players joining from all around the world in different time zones. And because the games were held on Thursday US time, I can imagine that's why quite a few US players had to drop out of the tournament. There were quite a few withdrawals due to school and exams and so on. And that's rather unfortunate. But on the screen here we have the final results in order. And so huge congratulations to John Lee again for taking this time outright first place. And also to Little Plotkin and from Canada, who also just started streaming. And there's myself in third place. And also a couple of disqualifications, as you can see here, and yeah, some very experienced Crazyhouse players on Lichess further down. So let's move on to the page where you can see and download all the individual games. So what we might do here is to have a look at my own individual games. And before we do that, just a funny story about the qualification process, because I was actually extremely fortunate to qualify for the finals. I had booked a trip to New Zealand about 2 months in advance, and this period where I was in New Zealand was over the qualifying period, which is about a week before the finals. And I was literally in a sheep paddock in the middle of nowhere trying to connect via my mobile phone. And because the app doesn't support Crazyhouse or any variant, except for 960 perhaps, I had to connect via Bluetooth to my laptop, which I didn't really want to bring to New Zealand, but I also really wanted to qualify for the finals. So yeah, those who played me in the qualifiers, this explains why I would sit there for a minute, or lag out, or lose on time, or it would literally sometimes take 10 seconds just for a move to get through to the server. So somehow I managed to get 5 out of 7 in one of the qualifiers and got through on tie breaks, but I was extremely fortunate to make it through the finals. So let's get on to some game analysis, and we'll go in order. And I'm actually going to use the Lichess interface for the game analysis because I couldn't find the chess.com analysis board for variants. You can do a game replay which shows the game in real time, which could be useful, but it doesn't let you look at variations and so on. And I've also included the computer graph for each game, and also the centi-pawn loss, as you can see down the bottom. And this will give you some indication as to which games were smooth sailing from beginning to end. If you can see the computer graph just rising and rising. If you see a lot of spikes in the graph, it's a very sharp game with a lot of mistakes from both sides. Often you see this at the end due to time scrambles, which I had quite a few. But let's go on to game 1. My opponent here is, I believe, a chess grandmaster from Russia with a FIDE over 2500. Not a well-known Crazyhouse player though, Dr. Wittmann. So I had white in the first game, and let's get started. So e4, e6, bishop comes out early. Yeah, I like to just kick the bishop back to a5 and even play b4, kick it back to b6. So once I get d4 in, this bishop isn't going to play too much of a role in the opening. Knight e7 is a bit unusual, and already I'm in a completely unfamiliar position after 6 moves. So we'll see what Dr. Wittmann has in store. I think he's also just playing some, I guess, what he considers safe moves in the opening. Knight e7, knight d7, bishop e3, castle, castle. So white has a space advantage, but e5 is definitely a good way to activate the c8 bishop. And I didn't want to exchange pawns here because after the trades on e5, you know, he's got chances on h3, pawn dropping on h3 and so on. And maybe I could get in first with h6, but I've also got to watch out for the bishop trade here. So it's not immediately clear how to proceed. I chose to swap off knights instead. Knight d5, take, 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 take. Pawn at g6, it's a good way to block out any sacrifices on h7. Maybe that's what he was worried about here. I do have a pawn drop on h6, but in hindsight, I guess also pawn at e6 looks pretty good for white too. Even knight at e6. Just trying to hack through these dark squares here on g7 and f8. What I played looked okay, but after queen f6, really wasn't sure what to do here. There's a little bit of pressure on f2. Pawn dropping on g7 doesn't help too much. Maybe I should take the rook on f8. It's a little bit unclear what to do. And I thought, playing a chess grandmaster, I might just grab his queen, because I was actually expecting him to move the queen away, which is what an inexperienced Crazyhouse player would probably do. But he made a very good decision here and just sacked the queen for 2 pieces. And I started to realize that things have gone horribly wrong already in the opening. So I've got a queen in hand against a lot of minors, but I don't actually have any easy avenue into his king. So I can drop the queen on e7, but so what? He just blocks. And he's going to eject the queen with bishop at f6 very soon, start putting bishops on the dark squares, and I actually have nothing. So already, yeah, I'm just stuck for a good idea here. So I just made some moves. Pawn at e7 really isn't going anywhere. It's very easy for him to drop a bishop or a knight and just defend the rook on e8. So queen at d8, things are not looking very good at the moment. And he's doing exactly the right thing, just dropping pieces around his king. He's got so many pieces in hand. Kicking my poor queen around. I have 2 queens on the board, but it's probably at this stage even have to have the queens off the board and to keep them as potential, because they're just going to get harassed. And yeah, as I said, I have no plan whatsoever. I'm just making moves in the hope that some opportunity for initiative will present itself. But this is a very, very bad position for white here. He's, yeah, again, doing the right thing, just dropping pieces all over the board. Bishop f8, yeah, not necessary. But it's actually pretty hard for black to go wrong here, because his king is just so safe. I'm going to need a ton of dynamite here to break through that wall. So it's looking very bad. I'm also a few seconds down on the clock, so I really have to speed up. Bishop g4, yeah, okay, I don't mind losing a rook there. As long as my king is safe, yeah, I mean, what hope do I have? Go for a flag. That's about all I have at this stage. Yeah, rook at e8, fine. Yeah, just dropping some pieces on the board. Nothing much has changed in the last 10 or 15 moves. Knight at c7, yeah, whatever, win a rook. Don't really care too much. Sack the queen back, but he doesn't even want it. Probably the right decision again. a6, knight takes pawn. Hoping to get something going on f7, but he's just got way too much defense. Knight at g5, queen comes back. Probably pawn at f3 looks good, or pawn to f3, but no, he's trying to clean up my queenside pawns. So rook at b3, desperately holding on. And that's more like it, making a weakness on the king side. So just barely surviving at this stage. So we getting into a time scramble where both players have less than 10 seconds left. I'm still about 3 or 4 seconds down. It's looking extremely bad. Dropping a knight on f7. Okay, it's a pretty useless move. I've got nothing going for me. He can just clear that up with knight takes and rook takes, but he decided to play queen f4 instead. And with about 3 seconds left on the clock, I'm going to grab the queen and mate on h8. And, well, what to say. Just extremely fortunate to get away with this one. He could have done literally any other move on the board except drop a queen here and been able to get away with a win on time. So yeah, I mean, obviously knight takes queen is a good way to proceed here for black. And yeah, rook on h8 is nothing. He can swap knights, get rid of the pawn, and I'm just dead lost. So yeah, I was very lucky to get away with that one. Alright, so 1 out of 1. Let's forget about that one and move on to round 2. Vempelli with white, so 2 whites in a row. I had a few of these where I had 2 of the same colour in a row, and I wasn't quite sure how the pairings worked, but happy to get white against Vempelli. He's a well-known theoretician from Lichess. We often play the same opening with e4, e5. He does this early bishop e7. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do something random. I'm happy, always happy to get a random position against Vempelli. I just decided to play f4. I think I've only ever played this twice in my life, and the first time was actually against Vaboris from Fix in the previous Chess.com Championship. I got away with a win that game, but he played the very sharp pawn to e5, so what do you call it, From's Gambit in the Birds opening in normal chess. And the game went something like this, knight f3. Actually, I dropped a pawn back on f2. And anyway, that's past history, but Vempelli played it slightly differently. Went for d5 and d4. Now, I have had this position before, a tempo down with the reverse colours, and reminds me a lot of the games I've had against a player called D-Forking River on Lichess, and that player is apparently a dupe of another player, so putting 2 and 2 together, well, it might be Vempelli. There's also other people that play this move, d4, but not too many. The field is very narrow, so I'm quite happy to be a tempo up in a somewhat familiar position. So c3 I think is a good move, just trading the pawns off, and then queen a4 check. So not much choice here but to return, and I thought pawn a6 was also a good move. So here black has to be really careful to watch out for all the light squares being undermined, with a pawn swap followed by pawn on a6 coming next. So the idea of rook b8 is to clear the square a8 for the bishop. So just as an example, take, pawn a6, bishop a8. And it's not that easy for white here to grab another pawn for b7. So, I don't know, e3 or knight e5 or something. But then black can easily just put a pawn on d7, and he doesn't seem to have too many worries in the opening. So I decided to play e3 instead, and just leave this capture for later. I thought that was a good idea. So bishop g4, very happy to see the bishop moving away from b7 and c6. So now is the right time to take on b7. And already white has a decent position out of the opening. Okay, he took on f3, hoping for some sort of attack, I guess, on f2, but I have a lot of pawn coverage here. He's quite undeveloped. So he's got to get something going on the king side here, because he's got weaknesses everywhere on the light squares. So, pawn at d7, pawn at d5. Yeah, just quite happy to kick that knight. Obviously, it's got no good squares at the moment. So he just throws it away. Pawn takes, queen comes back. So knight at e5. Yeah, wasn't sure about this. Knight at a5 was another choice. don't have a lot of weaknesses in my position. I've got to watch out for c2, of course, in case he can kick the queen away. But yeah, I'm just going for an attack on the light squares d7, c6, maybe f7, but it's more in the direction of d7, and possibly combined with dropping a pawn here on c6. So what comes next? Knight at c5, good move, kicking the queen away, queen comes back. Pawn at f6, yeah, I just should move the knight back. There's no need to sacrifice, he's got too much defense at the moment. Or d4 is the other choice, just trading knights. Pawn takes on f4. Wasn't quite sure again what to do. Should I take on f4? Should I play c6? Knight at a5. There's quite a big choice for both sides here. I decided to go knight at a5. Maybe this wasn't the best choice, because after take, yeah, I really don't know what's going on. Maybe he has another option here. Can he take advantage of this somehow? No, does knight at b4 get anywhere? I mean, if there's some way to keep the pressure up on e3 while making a simultaneous threat, this would be ideal, but yeah, it's not obvious for a human anyway. Pawn at d4 doesn't seem to get anywhere. I don't know, let's just get on with the game. I'm probably missing something here. Rook b4, bishop at c3, the rook goes for a wander. So it's a happy rook over here on h4. He's moved away from home. Maybe Vempelli's hoping for something like pawn at g3, so I just decided to block that out. Rook at h5, rook h5, bishop at d4. So there's a new target on g7, which he blocked, and now the attack goes back to the light squares, with ideas of c6 coming, and now black has to be really careful. Decides to play knight at d5, which I'm quite happy about because it doesn't support the key squares here, again, which are c6 and d7. So now is the right time to bust him open with c6, and I think white is clearly winning from this point onwards. So there's just no defense because he's only got a pawn in hand. Pawns are not very good at defending the 7th rank. You can occupy the 7th rank with a pawn, but you can't put a pawn on the 8th rank. So there's no good way to defend d7. Knight b6, I'll probably just trade and replace with a pawn, or trade a couple of times. There's many options there, but let's just finish the game. Pawn d7, knight b7. He has no good moves because I'm just going to promote next turn, and it's all over. Take and queen drop on e8. So pretty clean finish, but it was it was a bit of a mess early on. Maybe there was some improvements for black in the opening. Probably just leave the bishop on d7 and drop a pawn here, or just start developing the pieces, or e6. Okay, so 2 out of 2, pretty happy with my start. Well, with my results at least, maybe not the first game. So round 3, Chicken from the US. Chicken is a player I haven't come across against too many times. He's more known as a Bughouse player, but he did extremely well in the chess.com championship in 2016, tying for first place with Zhang Li, and always a very dangerous opponent and extremely fast. I just heard a comment yesterday, he's very good at 30-second Crazyhouse, and there was obviously a fan wanted him to return to 30-second Crazyhouse, but I haven't seen him play too much on Lichess. So black against Chicken, let's get on with the game. E4, E5. So this sort of Philidor opening is what I'm most familiar with from the black side. And yeah, I didn't know whether Chicken would know a lot of details about this opening. So opening the position early is certainly an option for white with d4, take. And queen e7 is what I've played the most. I'm not sure who was the player who invented this opening, because it's obviously quite unusual. Maybe it was Sexy and I Know It, or Vempelli, or M. Michael. One of these guys who are well-known theoreticians in Crazyhouse. So, what are White's options here? I had a game in the qualifiers where White traded knights and then castled and got a reasonable position. There's this extremely dangerous move, bishop takes f7, sacrificing a bishop and getting a couple of pawns to drop. Probably one of White's better options there. You can trade knights immediately. Probably not too many other choices. Maybe bishop b5 also. I think high contrast. Had a few games with bishop b5. So let's go back to the game. Knight c3. Another obvious move. But here I'm happy with just trading and going pawn on h3. Now this game was covered on the official chess.com stream by commentators Danny and Yasser Seirawan, a very famous grandmaster, also who is extremely proficient in Crazyhouse. And he had high praise with this move, pawn at h3. But it's a very well-known tactic to Crazyhouse, Bughouse players, and although I haven't taken Crazyhouse too seriously apart from the last year when the first chess.com championship was held. That's when I started playing a lot more Crazyhouse. But I have been playing Bughouse on Fix for 15 plus years, since about 1998 or 99. It's close to 20 years. So yeah, I mean this move took about 1 second, and it was pretty obvious to see what's coming. But I was surprised Chicken actually took quite a long time on his next turn. Because he took about 30 seconds on the next turn. So, I mean, it's obvious White wants to take on g2, drop a knight on f3, and it's a very obvious fork here. So White really would like a bishop in hand for f1 or f3. And I guess Chicken really didn't want to play bishop back to f1. You can play rook g1, but then I'm taking on g2 anyway, and you still have to cover f3, maybe pawn at e2, but it's quite passive, and I'd be quite comfortable in that sort of position. So he played a move which I wasn't expecting, bishop b5 check, and I'm just going to turn these arrows off. Just give me a second. Best move arrow. So that's the computer's move, which he was pointing to there with c6, and I did briefly consider this over the board. What to say? I mean, you always have to be extremely careful weakening the square c7, because at any moment he has knight d5, knight at c7, and although my attack actually gets through first with pawn takes and knight at f3, I just thought I could do this a little bit more safely with bishop d7, so that's my reasoning there. So trading bishops, bishop at f5, I was expecting this. Bishop e6, it's pretty much forced, take. So with all these trades, it doesn't really benefit White that much, except he does have a bishop in hand, but even still I have ways to proceed here with take and knight at h4. And so from here, well, I mean, he's just got to guard the bishop. Rook g1, he doesn't have a lot of choice. And Yasser mentioned on the stream that bishop at e5 was an option. And I saw this actually about 2 seconds too late after I'd already moved. And it certainly does look extremely good for black. But on the other hand, if White simply moves the queen, I don't know, let's say back to d3, the point is that he can now take on h2, and of course if he moves the rook I take on g2 with check. But White does have some very interesting resources with a move, for instance bishop g5. And although in Crazyhouse you'd probably prefer a rook over a knight, take. So a key point to notice here, the bishop covers f2, so there's no possible sacrifices here. And the resulting position is actually not that bad for White. because black only has a rook and 2 pawns in hand. The rooks on the back rank are covered. Rook drops on the back rank. Rook at h2 is possible, but could he cover that with a move like queen g3? And black is seriously struggling here in development. I mean, look at all these guys here. So it turns out white will be doing quite okay in that variation. So even though at first sight bishop e5, bishop at e5 looks very strong for black, not so convincing after all, I have to say. So I'm quite happy with this move, bishop h3. And as pointed out on the chess.com stream, the idea is very simple: to deflect the bishop away from f3 and to follow up with knight f3 here. So not many options for white. He's got to cover f3, so knight at g5, giving away the bishop. Now here's a very important moment. I should have really taken with the knight to check, because compare this to the previous variation where we just looked at. Now the first rank is clear for a rook drop, and this is extremely dangerous for white because he can't evacuate with this king so easily compared to the previous line where he could castle queenside. And yeah, he can follow it with pawn at f7, but even if he takes here, I do believe my attack is getting through first, and I'm not sure whether white can survive this. Bishop at e1, maybe king e2, king d1. I'll just take the knight, or the pawn would check. And the problem with the knight on f7 is a well-known expression that the knight next to your king is your best friend, because the white just doesn't have any obvious checks here. I mean, he's probably going to have to block it at some point to burn a piece, and yeah, I mean, I'm looking at stuff like pawn at d7. Even if he gets in pawn at d7, if the checks run out somehow, I don't know. I think there's ways for black to survive, but I'm just looking at some random moves here. Bishop f1, pawn blocks. Yeah. Maybe there was something better. Bishop f1 now. Even just taking here. Is there a force mate for white? Doesn't look like it to me, but I may be wrong. King e7 is what I was looking at. Maybe I'm just in fantasy land at the moment. Take pawn there. Maybe king d8 is also possible here. Take that with not check. Yeah, crazy position. What is happening? There, pawn there, rook takes. I don't know, what's the material like? Rook for a knight, extra pawn for black, but more importantly a safe king, so maybe this is even better. And yeah, I'm not using the engine here to analyze, so I may be completely wrong here, but it looks okay for black. In the game, bishop takes g2 is played. So it's interesting he's not going for pawn on f7 here, because take knight f3 check. And there's definitely not enough resources for white to checkmate him, and black gets in with the first attack. Let's see, where are we up to? So pawn on f2 makes a lot of sense. This is a good move because now he's definitely threatening to drop a pawn on f7, and f3 is now covered. So bishop at h5 is a multi-purpose move, just covering f7. In some cases threatening to take on e2 and then knight f3 check, but we'll see if I can arrange that later on. So pawn at g3 again, good move from white. Obviously, if the knight moves back, it's just a free bishop on g2. So I have to counter-attack. h6, take here. And a key move, bishop takes e2. It's very important to find this move. So now if knight takes, obviously knight at f3 check is good for black. So what else apart from king takes? Drop a pawn is obvious. Take there, force the king out. Now what is not so obvious, and again I have to go back to Yes's commentary, because he said knight at e5 is an automatic. And it is actually the move I played in the game. But you would think from a chess perspective, I mean, it's also good to just pick up a rook on g2. And why didn't I play that? Well, it's not that easy to explain, but after this capture, let's say bishop takes pawn, it's a bit similar to the previous not the previous, but you know, a couple of minutes ago we looked at a variation where I only had a rook and a pawn in hand, and I'm completely undeveloped at the back. And here, the white king is not in so much danger, because I don't have a good knight move to follow up. I've always got to watch out for, you know, bishop at g6 coming if ever I want to drop a pawn somewhere on the board. Or even just pawn at g6, pawn at f7, stuff like this. And the king has plenty of ways to escape if I start dropping pieces. I don't have access to the back rank again. That's quite an important feature here. So this is not as good as what I played in the game. And also Yes's suggestion knight at e5, it's much better. So now the king can't come back this way so easily, because obviously I'm dropping a pawn here on f3. Taking here. Pawn takes looks good. Rook takes also looks good. And there's plenty of avenues here to keep pressing. And also black's king is much safer than the previous line. So Chicken played the right move, which is king e3, or which is what I thought. Computer calls it a blunder, but I don't understand the computer's moves, so let's just get on with the game. So now, probably should have gone pawn at f4, because here, the point is that if king d2, there's the obvious fork on f3, and king e2 just transposes back to the previous line with pawn to f3. So it's slightly better than what I did in the game. I went knight to f6 simply because I was just worried about my lack of development, and I'm threatening to keep going forwards with knight g4, knight fg4, forcing the king to a square where he doesn't want to be. Does perhaps allow some defensive resources like bishop at e2 or bishop at d1, something like that, or even pawn at e2, covering this important f3 square. Let's see what happened. Just going for the material, pawn takes g5, knight g4 check, rook takes, king d2, rook takes pawn. And I wasn't quite sure. I had a good feeling that I'm still keeping the initiative here because there's some obvious threats on f2. Also a big threat is pawn at e3 check. And then creeping closer to the back row with pawn takes f2. And I have bishop at g6, pawn f7 well covered. So at this stage there's no obvious counter-attack for white. So let's continue. He's just covering f2. It's a good move. And I really should have played pawn at e3 immediately. I was kicking myself for not doing this. I played pawn at e5, which is, well, it's okay. But I think pawn at e3 was better. Even now, pawn at e3. But knight takes f2, not such a bad move. Take, block. Bishop in, block. But here, for black, it's really essential to keep the initiative with pawn at e3. And one line which I would like to demonstrate is if plays the obvious move, pawn takes bishop. This is going to lose to pawn at e3 check. I can't go here because rook drop mates. Comes back here. I play rook to f1. Very important move, rook to f1, not rook at f1. So whatever he blocks with, he's just going to end up in a mating net on the first rank. So for instance, take distance check with rook at g1, block bishop at f2, and mate on e1. And whatever he blocks with on e1, it doesn't matter. If he blocks with the knight instead, it's still a mate after take rook here and knight at g2, followed by rook takes whatever he blocks with. So the key move here for black is pawn at d4. I did not play that in the game. I wasted a move with bishop takes pawn. I mean, yes, very natural move. Cleaning up the pieces on the 5th rank, as John Lee would like to say. He always goes for the most advanced piece to clean up. Good idea, but it does allow white to drop with attack on, well, firstly with check, but now attacking the rook on f2, and also guarding a very important square on e3. So I'm losing the initiative, and it's unclear here what is happening. Now, it's important to notice we don't have the move times imported on Lichess, but I do have a sizable time advantage. Chicken is down to his last 20 seconds or so, and I still have over a minute left on the clock. So although it looks extremely risky to take on e5, a good Bughouse player will notice immediately there are no knight checks. For instance, the bishop here is covering c5. There's no checks on the back row. Bishop here takes too long. I get the first attack. So although yes, I was surprised with queen at d3 in the chess.com stream, it's probably the best practical decision for chicken, because I made one of my favorite expressions, and John Lee's also now, is an egregious error. I made an egregious error here with rook at d6. Absolutely horrible, horrible blunder. And what I didn't realize over the board, and I really should have used more time here, I have access to the d4 square. Why not just drop a pawn on d4? I mean, yes, rook d4 even wins the queen, but it's probably even better to drop a pawn, because I'm threatening bishop takes e3 check. And these pointy pieces, these spiky pieces here with the bishop and the pawn, are going to cause white immense difficulties in defense, because he doesn't have any bishops to drop. I've got f2 covered, so he can't drop a pawn on f2. He probably has to play a very sad looking move like knight at d1. I mean, what else? And here I can start undermining the knight, maybe rook at f1. This just looks horrible for white. I think it's already just completely lost. And he has no checks. So this was, in hindsight, a very obvious win for black, but yeah, well, things happen over the board which you sometimes can't explain. All right, let's look at that horrible move, rook at d6. Obviously, it blocks off the bishop, so he has knight at c5 check. And I thought I'd be safe on e7. What I didn't notice was he has this very nice move, knight d5 check. Or even, he could probably start with queen takes d6 as well. And the point is, I can't afford to take it back with a pawn because he has too many knights. This will be an instant checkmate. And if I go this way, there's rook takes f7 as well. So I'd be forced to take it back with the king, but then I don't know, probably just clearing c6 with knight takes b7, rook at d7 also looks very attractive, and there's probably just a forced mate here with knight at a5, pawn at b5. I'm terrible at finding forced mates, as anyone on Lichess will verify. Pawn a3, pawn there. I'm doing this way too slow, but as long as we get there in the end, this will prove a point at least. And a checkmate, bishop at b4. Probably knight takes b7 before in this position was much faster. Okay, so it looks like Chicken missed a forced mate there, but he played what I thought was a good move at the time, knight d5 check. Pawn is now, it gives him access to the f5 square. I had to find the most accurate king move, which was king e8. Very hard to work out with little time remaining. I played king d8. It does allow knight takes b7, and I'm in big trouble again. King c8, wrong way again. Knight takes check, bishop takes. Pawn at c6. Because he had 2 pawns in hand, probably pawn at b7 was better. Followed by queen b5. It smells like mate. And because he can take this bishop with check at any time if he wants another pointy piece on the diagonal. But he played pawn at c6 with about 5 or 6 seconds remaining on the clock. I still have about 20. So it's just a mad time scramble. And you can see the graph. It's quite useful to look at the position, look at the computer graph, because obviously there's some wild oscillations going on here. We just have no time left. It's a mad time scramble. Check, 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 check. He's down to about 3 seconds or less. Check, block, check, block, check. And so I did have pawn at d2 there also. And this is probably why chicken pre-moved queen d2. Just expecting pawn at d2. So now take, take. It's a forced mate, very obviously, with knight at c3. But it really doesn't matter in this stage. With less than 1 second, there's no way chicken's going to hang on. So I'm just doing whatever checks, check, check, and that is it. Ends in a flag, but I have a forced mate anyway with knight at c4 or something like that. Doesn't matter. They all look good. Queen at d4 looks good. Yeah, probably just knight here, here. Start dropping the queens on, and it's a mate on h2 with a knight, just to show it on the board. But yeah, I was a bit lucky to win that game because chicken had a couple of forced mates. Very hard to see with less than 10 seconds on the clock though. But big turning point here, where pawn at d4 was a big improvement. It's very unnatural for me to block off the square c5 like that, and I wouldn't normally make a mistake like that and allow the attack to continue. Okay, so 3 out of 3, let's move on. There was some interesting analysis there, so that's why I spent a bit more time on this game. Nice to defeat one of the previous winners of the Chess.com Championship. Okay, we have next Schoolmeester, better known as Opperwezen on Lichess. Opperwezen is an international master from the Netherlands, very well-known player. And okay, white again, 3 out of 4 whites. Very happy to take white against a very strong opponent. So, by the way, this computer graph is looking pretty good. So there's a couple of moments here where Opper had improvements, which I'll point out. Okay, so we have a early d5, trading pawns. Yeah, I'm quite familiar with this move, bishop c4. Most people will go e6. Castles, pawn at g4, knight comes back. So it looks a little bit passive from white's perspective, but the knight on e1 does help in many situations where black tries to, go nuts with the pawns, h5, h4, h3, or start dropping pawns on h3 and overcommitting to the attack. The knight on e5 is a very good defender. Sometimes white can also play the move f3, and the knight can always return after the exchange. Okay, h5, d4, bishop d6. There are some potential threats here with queen h4, or possibly even sacrificing on h2 that I have to be careful of. And why is the engine on? I turned you off. Bye-bye, go back to sleep. So I probably next time I had this position, I would play knight to e4. Just covering some dark squares around the king, possibly swapping off the bishop at the right time on d6. And he doesn't really want to start attacking with f5. It's just a bit too loose. And it would be nice to pop in here on g5 with a secure knight. He doesn't have any pawns to chase me away. Not so easy to grab a pawn either. without sacrificing too much. But there's probably some theory in that position already with knight e4. So going back to the game, I played pawn at h6. It's well known to me, this idea of pawn takes pawn and bishop takes knight, and eventually dropping a knight here and taking back on h5. So it's a fairly typical theme for me, maybe not so well known for other players, but I have played this a few times before on Lichess. So what was I expecting here? Probably expecting pawn takes, knight drop, king there, knight takes, and bishop h2 check is a very interesting sacrifice, the purpose of which is to play check here and take back the knight on h5. And I think this is the way black should proceed, because now there's no big danger of pawn dropping on g7. So yes, I can respond with king h1, and now here tempo is very important. He's got to play pawn g7 first, pawn at f6 take, but I don't have any more pawns to drop, so it might go something like knight takes pawn, pawn at g7, but I don't have pawn at f6 anymore. How can I get in to your dark square complex? I don't know. It's a messy position. I do have knight takes f6, but of course he is not obliged to take back, and he can literally do any other move and he's probably okay. I don't know. Bishop at g6, pawn at g6, bishop comes back somewhere. I don't know. It's a rich position here. Plenty of options for both sides, but I think black is doing quite okay. Well, let's come back to the game. So perhaps Oppa was afraid of some big attack on g7. So he dropped a pawn there, but I'm quite happy because now white is shutting out a lot of avenues for black to counterattack. So take, dropping a piece on e5 is always nice, just to clear, or to rather block off this diagonal here. And also to keep the other bishop contained on c8. I'm not quite sure how black should proceed, because there's no obvious moves which stand out here. Trading the bishop, trading the queen doesn't really help him too much with the knights here, because these squares are so well covered on f2 and g2. He doesn't have a lot of material in hand. So let's see. Take, bishop at d5. But I realized that the very typical Bughouse theme of knight dropping on h3 just doesn't work at the moment, because I can play king h1. And as long as I have the squares f2 and g2 covered, there's no smothered mates with queen at g1. So that means I have a move up my sleeve and I can do, well, whatever I want. So why not threaten checkmate? Bishop h4 is always a good idea. Also covers an important square on f2 in case there's some pawn at e2 or bishop e2 taking the knight later on. Let's see. Queen at d7, very passive, but not many other viable moves there. I thought bishop h6 is very nice for white. Works out well. So some obvious deflection tactics here. Pawn takes, knight at f6 check. I could even start with pawn at g7. Anything is good here for white. Whoops, skipped ahead. Where are we up to? And rook takes h6. Well, I'm not even going to think too much. In analysis, there's some very straightforward moves, and with a pawn in hand, I can just drop it on e7. Should be an easy win for white. Okay, so Oppa's just got to ignore the pawn. He goes bishop takes g2. And I thought for a little bit, because I have some options. I can ignore the bishop. I can take it if I'm feeling very brave. Probably knight takes looks safest, but of course I was going to watch out for knight h3, pawn f3, stuff like this. I did take it with a knight. Yeah, I know the computer wants to take on g7 here, but I thought from a human perspective it's just a little bit scary to allow stuff like knight at h3 or knight at e2 with more checks coming. I mean, yeah, of course he doesn't have a pawn in hand yet, and it's not that easy to obtain. But yeah, I just didn't want to even allow the possibility. So I thought knight takes was safe enough. And I was very happy to find the move knight d e3. And the point is here is that black wants diagonals. He wants pointy pieces. He wants pawns and bishops and queens. So if he trades here, what happened in the game? He took the bishop. If he trades here pawn for knight, it's a good moment to point out in Bughouse, you can just ask your partner for more diagonals. Give me a pawn, give me a bishop. I'm just going to keep rinsing and repeating, putting a pawn on h3, exchanging pawns for knights, whatever. Pawns for rooks after rook at g1. And I'm just going to keep asking my partner for pawns and bishops. And he can do this forever. But in Crazyhouse, to get a pawn here, or a bishop, I mean, as we saw before, he certainly doesn't want to take on h6. Because even then, it still takes 2 moves just to make the first check. Well, it's not going to be the first check. It's going to be the second check, because I'm going to get in first. So this explains why he went knight takes bishop here. Sorry. Don't tell me I overwrote the game. Did I lose the game? No, I didn't lose the game. Yeah, here we go. He went knight takes bishop because, well, he wants to drop a bishop on f3 and then just keep taking on g2. So I do have to act quickly, and although I could probably take that back and then perhaps just stick a knight back on g2 for familiar reasons by now, I hope. I thought it should just be a force win, just taking on g7, which is what happened in the game. So queen e7, obviously there was a threat to drop on f6 with a knight. I do it anyway. Rook d1 check just to make him burn one of his precious diagonal pieces. He played bishop d7, and now gives me the b7 square. Alright, it's all over from here. Queen at a8. There is no defense. Take there. I need a knight in hand. Is it risky to take on h4? Absolutely not, because he's only got a queen, and look at the coverage on g2. 2 knights and a king, and he just has no moves left. By the way, I also have these squares covered, so there's absolutely no queen drop, which makes any sense. And it's all over after knight at b7. Okay, so moving on to 4 out of 4. So I'm starting to feel more confident, get the groove. And I think I was one of about 4 or 5 players on maximum points. 4 out of 4. Let's start round 5. Little Plotkin, my buddy from Canada, as he will very openly acknowledge, I have quite a good record against him on Lead Chess. But in a 1-game match, absolutely anything goes. Anything can happen, and with black especially, yeah, you're always going to be slightly worse out of the opening. So Little Plotkin, very, very fast player. I absolutely do not want to get into a time scramble against him. He's very good at 1-minute chess, 30-second chess, any kinds of variants. As you may know, he started streaming, doing simuls, playing whatever, King of the Hill, Crazyhouse, Standard Chess, Racing Kings. Where else does he play? Atomic, 3 Check. He plays everything, this guy. So, well, let's see. Let's go back to the Crazyhouse. If I ever do a simul on Lead Chess, I think I'd stick to Crazyhouse. I don't want to start branching off in too many directions. So I'm pretty much going to stick to Crazyhouse and Bughouse at this stage with the streams. Maybe play a little bit of chess on chess.com. And Bughouse as well. Okay, let's get on with the game. E4, E5, knight f3, familiar story. D4 as well. Yeah, Schwanet also on Lichess has had a little bit of success playing this move C3. And although the engine is quite happy to play black and just go knight f6, so yeah, you can take back the pawn, whatever. It's not so easy from a practical perspective to keep this diagonal open. And Plotkin and also Schwanet are one of the most aggressive players on the planet in Lichess. And anyway, see, black at this stage doesn't really have a lot of alternatives. You can accept the gambit with pawn takes pawn, but I just do not feel comfortable in this sort of position. Even making a wall, dropping on e6, I just don't like this sort of position after d5. He's going to hack away at these light squares. Even the sacrifice on f7, I feel very uncomfortable without having developed any pieces here. Alright, so back to the game. Knight f6 I think is good. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. D5. Now, in some situations, it's a little bit dangerous to play the move knight to e5 because the more trades white has at this stage, the better. Take, pawn to e6, stuff like this. But here, I don't know. I can probably get away with allowing this. Can I take on e6 and trade queens? Take on f2 check. There's pawn at c2 as well. Yeah, perhaps, yeah, white just can't do this. So knight at e5. Sorry, knight to e5 was definitely a viable option there. Queen e7, I'm really not happy with this move at all. And this is a problem where you have your own pet systems and you try to repeat them in other variations, because here, yeah, obviously I'm threatening cheapos with knight c3, but it's just not a very good idea to block out the bishop here in such an open position. So castle's a good move. Pawn at h3, typical attack, but rook e1 is a good way to escape. So, yeah, what to say from here? e6 is my biggest concern at the moment, because this knight is going to be a sitting target. If he puts a pawn on e6, he's already threatening to just pick off the knight for free. So this explains knight takes f2, and a chess player may laugh at this move, but I think it was a decent practical decision, because if he takes the queen with check, takes this back, I don't know, let's just say he grabs all the material. It's a little bit unclear what happens after pawn takes g2. So the point is here, I'm always going to have a safe king on d8, and if I can start dropping pawns, you know, g4, just to annoy him a little bit. If I can somehow chase the bishop away from f1, or perhaps bishop h3 is going to follow, dropping a rook on f1, maybe some potential for attack. If I can get a knight e5 also, yeah, I don't know. It's complicated. I really don't know what happens after pawn takes knight, whether I have anything, maybe not. Can I take the pawn back on c6? Looks like I'm just too far down on time. Meaning his attack is going to get in first. Bishop f7, king d8. Bishop moves out of the way, back to c4. Knight at f7 coming. Yeah. maybe knight e5 first, but it's just not looking very convincing for black. So I guess he could have just taken the queen. Took the knight instead. Let's go back to the game. So here I'm just blocking off the e-file ideas of playing the knight into g4, check, and dropping pawn on f2. But here Plotkin had a very impressive idea. He played check here, king d8. Okay, we talked about the king being safe on d8 before. But bishop g5 actually allows a check on g4, and he moves his king up to g3. I did not see this coming at all. And I was really struggling to find a good idea over the board because I just don't have the right pieces in hand. I need a bishop or a queen. And rooks and knights, okay, I mean, yeah, if I have a knight for f5 or h5 possibly, but not so easy to come by a knight at this stage. And here, yeah, I really have to block on f6 with something because I can't allow, you know, rook takes, bishop takes check, and the king's running. Even though they may not be a forced mate, well, I don't have any attack either. I had a feeling there was some other threat in the position. But yeah, just speaking on material, I can't allow the queen to drop even for a bishop at the moment. Because moves like pawn takes h3 clear the square g2, which is very hard to cover. So I played pawn at f6, which is the most obvious move, but actually moving the knight back to f6 was a more interesting option, which left some other options open, perhaps knight e4 at the right time. Not just yet, but if I can kick away the bishop first. And if he trades here, yeah, I don't mind, and I also don't mind giving up the queen for the rook. So the point is here now e8 is covered. And yeah, I'm starting to have some dangerous threats with rook here, rook takes g2, dropping pawns and bishops all over the place. It's very hard to analyze this sort of position because he's also got threats at pawn at g7 and queen at h8. Yeah, I don't know. It's a mess. But pawn at f6 perhaps is just a little bit too passive because he doesn't have to give me his precious bishop here. And he played a very good move here, pawn at d7. And I really just underestimated this position for white. So take. I'd like to show you a very nice line if I take the bishop. I mean, probably if you thought for 1 second you'd play a move like bishop at b5 or bishop at c6. But it's actually more precise for white to start with queen a4 check. I'm not sure whether Plotkin would have found this. It's a very accurate move, and the point is now that this queen, which may not have been used in the previous line, is now leading the way in the decisive attack. So for instance, pawn to c6, take. I just can't do this because of queen at b7, followed by taking here with the queen and just crashing through. Taking here with check and come at any time. Now he doesn't have a pawn in hand, so it feels like this move works, but he can actually drop the queen and open up the king with knight at c6 check. So capturing is forced, and followed up by a brilliant queen sacrifice. Queen takes c6, and there are just enough pawns to drop with mate on b7 or d7. So I'm not sure whether Plotkin would have found these precise moves, but queen a4 was a very precise way to finish off. So I can't take the bishop, which means I just have pawns and rook in hand, and I realized, yeah, I just don't have enough attack here. Pawn takes bishop. Yeah, okay, I've got bishop at h4 coming, but he can just start cleaning up pieces. Take there, king takes h3, and if I don't have a knight in hand and a knight's not coming, then it's just all over. I mean, I can't defend this square very effectively. Drop a pawn, okay, he'll just take it. Same thing again, I can't take the bishop. Just getting desperate here with h5. But yeah, it's already a forced mate. And very good finish from Plotkin. Knight at e6, take there. I can't come back because pawn at d7 dropping, and the classic mate on the back rank with enough pawns in hand. And the bishop would also do here. And rook at c8. So it's a forced mate. Take there, bishop drop, come back. And yeah, he can do everything with check. Alright, so I resigned in this position with pawn at f7 to follow. And let's move on. So my first loss in the event, still on 4 out of 5. Reasonably happy with 4 out of 5. But Plotkin, the man to beat, as we found out in the event. Okay. We are up to round 6 in a very long event which took about an hour and 40 minutes overall. I have no idea how long I've been recording, but could end up an hour and 40 minutes or so. We'll see. Okay, White versus Jeffrey X. Very well-known player from all websites, in particular chess.com, Jeffrey Xiong. He's playing in the Pro League, in the speed chess matches on chess.com. One of the top US chess grandmasters, over 2,600 FIDE. So this is my second chess grandmaster in the event, in 6 rounds. And Jeffrey's also very well known in the Bughouse scene, one of the top Bughouse players, I would say, in the world. I think I know who he is on Lichess. I'm not going to say, but I have about an even record against him, and he's also a very good Crazyhouse player. Maybe not so familiar with Crazyhouse compared to other variants, but let's see how we go. e4, d5. We have an early gambit, which I'm going to decline. If you want to grab the pawn, you can always go bishop b5 check, c6, pawn takes, bishop back somewhere. And if you follow Jan Lee's stream, you'll see a couple of games that start like this. But I prefer to play a little bit more safe and not accept the gambit with knight c3, and it's a good way to transpose into familiar lines, because you would anticipate that black eventually has to take back the pawn. I mean, what else is he going to do? I don't think in Crazyhouse the Portuguese style bishop g4 is any good. What would I do here? f3, bishop e2, knight f3. Any of these moves seem reasonable. Probably just bishop e2. Looks quite okay. Bishop b5 check also. Let's see. So knight takes, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, e6, castles. So knight b6. I'm quite happy to see this move. It's slightly more passive than the way Opperweisen played it in a previous game, and it's not so clear how this knight here is going to take a further role in the game, especially in the opening. Maybe useful to cover some squares if Jeffrey doesn't castle later on, which is pretty much what happened. Let's see, bishop d7, d4, bishop e7, rook e1, very natural developing moves, pawn at g4. Okay, so one of the points of bishop e7 is to cut off these squares for the knight. But here I noticed a good way to exchange pieces with knight e5, take on b5. So it's a critical moment already. I absolutely do not want to take back the bishop on b5. because of queen takes queen, rook takes queen. The first point to notice is that I have no square for a pawn or a queen on d8, d7, d6. And even if I take on c7 and he goes king f8, there is no forced mate, which gives black the first tempo to attack. And a good way to start would be to drop the bishop on f3, setting up the familiar pattern of knight at h3, forcing mate after take queen h1 or king h1, queen at g1. Hopefully this is familiar to all of you. So yeah, this smells like trouble for white, because although he doesn't have a lot of pieces in hand, I just can't stop bishop takes pawn, sacrificing the bishop, opening the king. Bishop at f1 doesn't help, because knight here anyway. If I take the bishop, he could start knight at h3, he could just take the pawn back. And as I pointed out in a previous game, having a pawn in hand does not help when your opponent is attacking and he's already taking over the third rank and the second rank. Where am I going to drop the pawn? If I drop it on g2, he's just going to force a mate again, like this. If I drop a bishop on f1, it holds the mate up temporarily, but he's always got deflection tactics of knight at h2, and it's going to be a mate on one of these squares next turn. So I just cannot allow this. But I did calculate in advance after bishop takes b5. I have an excellent intermezzo, queen takes g4. And I think white still has the edge in this position, mainly because of the threat of queen takes pawn. So I was a little bit surprised that Jeffrey allowed this. There are ways to defend, perhaps with bishop at g6, and although this may end up forcing black to sacrifice a piece after, for instance, pawn at h5, knight takes, oh sorry, black to move, well, no, I'd rather grab the bishop first, wouldn't I? Grab the bishop first. Let's see. Well, now he can play h5, stopping pawn on h5. What is going on here? So if I don't have pawn on h5, the new targets become the squares here, the dark squares d6, f6, h6. So in a position like this, I'd want to drop the queen back to a square where the knight can't hit me, noticing that he doesn't have any pawns or bishops in hand. And my next move would either be pawn at h6 or pawn at d6 or pawn at f6, even if that involves a sacrifice. I'm going to crash through on g7 eventually. And the bishop here doesn't help cover g7. Yes, it does block out the queen on the g-file, but there are other ways to attack. And you can see also the knight here doesn't help in defense on the dark squares. Just trying to work out these colors on lichess. That's blue, that's green, that's red, oh that's yellow, that's... Anyway, we'll work it out later. Okay, so just going back to the game, queen takes g4, he does allow queen takes g7, with the defense knight at g6. Okay, so I have many options how to proceed here. And there are some players on lichess who know I am very comfortable with sacrificing a queen for a rook on h8 and then dropping it back immediately on g8. So I don't mind giving up a rook for a queen, because sooner or later there is going to be a pawn landing on g7, either now or after rook takes knight. The only question is, am I comfortable allowing a sacrifice on g2? With, you know, threats like pawn at g4, queen at g4, pawn at f3 coming. He doesn't need a lot of pieces in hand to set up a decisive attack. And it's probably okay, but it also means if ever I want to play moves like pawn at f6, I've always got to calculate what happens after bishop takes, queen takes. Suddenly he's got 3 pawns in hand. And I've really got to be careful with these light squares here. So I decided to take a practical approach here and play, to play knight at e4. And although if Jeffrey wants to trade bishop for knight, he can do this anytime. A knight in hand will be useful for his attack. But the obvious point is now that the bishop is blocked out, and I have two pieces covering on e4. And even if he drops the second bishop back on c6, it's then my turn, and then I can make an aggressive move like pawn at f6 or pawn at h5 or queen takes rook, pawn at g7, etc, etc. So I was pretty happy with knight at e4, and I was aware it may not be the best move, but I thought it was a good practical decision. Okay, bishop at f8. Well, okay, not much to say here. That forces the sacrifice, pseudo-sacrifice, whatever you want to call it, but I'm still pretty happy in this position. And as you will see later on in the game, this rook is my savior. A very important point to notice. If ever he gets any counterattack going, the rook is going to save me on g2 when he starts dropping stuff on f3 and h3. So it's quite important to keep the potential to open this g file. Even if I drop a pawn on g7, I do need to be able to open that at will, and I don't want to permanently bury my rook on g8 after dropping a pawn here. It's also important to point out that the king currently has avenues of escape on d7. And I thought after knight g6, pawn at g7, take. Queen d4 is a very interesting move from Jeffrey. And I was trying to work out, I mean, obviously Jeffrey is an extremely resourceful and tricky player. I was trying to work out whether he actually has any threats with this move, or whether he's just trying to get the king out of the way in castle. And I actually decided upon the latter. I thought he just wanted to castle queenside on the next turn. Yeah, get his king to safety. I don't have a lot of pieces in hand. And eventually start dropping stuff on f3, h3. Maybe find a way to deflect the rook off the back row, drop a queen on d1. And I'd like to play bishop e3. I just don't want to allow queen takes knight. So struggling to find a good move here. If there's no direct threats, yeah, of course I can always play pawn at f6, pawn at d6, pawn at g7. I just have a massive array of opportunities here to attack, to win some material back. But the move I decided upon was probably not in anyone's radar. Okay, well, let's just get on with it. It's pawn at c6. And I've been playing a bit of over the board chess in the last few months. And I've seen some lines in the c3 Sicilian as white, where as soon as black has the opportunity to castle and evacuate queenside, white throws in moves like a4, a5, just to discourage black from going that way, and or at least make him think twice. So that's all this pawn at c6 move does, is just to make Jeffrey think twice about castling queenside. Doesn't really serve any other purpose. And of course he can just take it, but then I'm going to follow up with either pawn at b7 or bishop at b7, taking on c6 with check. And I'd be pretty happy with this continuation. So he dropped a pawn on f3. It's kind of like a mirror image move. Well, it's just about a battle of who can get the first attack in. So again, very important to notice the rook is covering g2, so there's no immediate threat to drop a knight on h3 just yet. Alright, pawn at d7. There were some other options. I could take on b7. I could drop a bishop on f1 to defend. Could even drop a bishop on b5 perhaps. Anyway, let's let's go back to the game. Take, check. Take there. And in this current position, Black's king is fairly comfortable on d7. He's cleared the back rank for the rook. The white rook on g8 is more of a defensive piece, just covering squares at this stage. And I don't have a lot of on-board attackers which can threaten his king. So I feel like I really need to start dropping stuff on the board immediately to threaten the king. So this explains knight f6, check, king c6. Bishop f1 is a multi-purpose move which helps to cover g2, sets up some vague threats, so bishop at b5 or maybe d7 if I can clear the knight out of the way. But nothing direct at this stage just yet. So yeah, very good move, pawn at e2, because I have to play extremely precisely to keep any sort of advantage here. And I kind of messed up. I mean, you can see the computer evaluation here has some spikes. So it's an extremely complicated position where I have to defend very precisely. So bishop e3, maybe not the best move. Well, the option was to take with the bishop, distract the pawn here. Now I have to start checking, and the point is that I want to distract the king to a square where I can play bishop e3, opening the rook here, so queen at f1 is not so dangerous, but also obviously pinning the queen and winning the queen and setting up some mating attack myself, while these pawns here are helping to give the king a backward shield, but not really very useful in defense. Okay, so in this line he can also take on b5. And perhaps a4 check. I just want to bring his king to a square like b6, or if he goes back to c6 this time, I think the same thing would happen. King a5 is an option. Now, can I get away with bishop c3? Something very similar happened in the game. And because he only has one heavy piece, I think I can do this. So here, take. Knight takes or pawn takes, I'm really not sure. Let's have a look at this. So he doesn't have many checks. He's got this one, take there, take there. Yeah, and the rook check, I'm not sure whether it's getting anywhere. Knight at d4, king d3, bishop at f1 is also possible. Am I going to be safe? A little bit scary, but as you can see, doesn't have a lot of pieces to continue the attack. I feel safe. I'm going to stop the analysis here. I feel like it's safe, but I wouldn't be 100% sure without further analysis. But I feel like white should survive. Okay, so bishop e3, perhaps not the most accurate move because take. And pawn at h3, this move really took me by surprise. I was expecting pawn at e2. Okay, but perhaps this move is even better. I'm really not sure. It's just so difficult to analyze. So check here. I guess that makes some sense. Take there. Now the next move I did not see at all. I mean, the computer's move is just completely out of the ballpark in my mind, but it does make a lot of sense in hindsight in a 3-minute game where we've got, probably about 40 seconds left each on the clock, and maybe less, maybe even 30 seconds or less. Yeah, the move bishop at e2 check just did not occur to me at all. I will explain the purpose because I think for learning purposes it's quite important to see the engine's ideas and to explain them, because this just expands our our human knowledge and insight into the game. Of course, 99% of my commentary is not going to involve engine moves for the purposes of practical play and just explaining human ideas. But yeah, I mean, a move like this needs to be looked at because it's a check, it's a forcing move. It's a way to clear up the mess that will be happening very soon if I allow captures on g2 with threats combining with knight at e2 check. It's a way to fill this square with a pawn where he has no direct immediate threat. So then I can follow up pawn a4 check. If he does what he did in the game, queen takes pawn, knight c3 check, king c6. Even though I can't capture the queen back with check, it doesn't matter. I just take it back with the knight. Where's his mating attack? If he doesn't have knight at e2 check, followed by pawn takes g2, there is no mating attack. And even though he can do these moves like this, again, notice the rook here is my savior. And now, yeah, I mean, it's pawn at b5 threat. I think he has to defend the threat of pawn at b5. I can hopefully clear up the mess here, maybe even follow up with moves like c4. I mean, queen at c4 taking the knight is also an option. I've got to watch out for pawn at h3 coming next. But yeah, maybe c4. Perhaps I get the first attack in with drops here and here. I don't know, but I absolutely did not see this at all in the game. Bishop e2. I need to discover that after the game. So a4 is the obvious human move, and perhaps if Jeffrey had more time to analyze the details here, he would have found the best move, king to a5. Bit surprising, but I think it should be clear from the previous analysis that I just can't afford to grab the queen without allowing a forcing mate with, check here, take there, rook takes. He has too many diagonals, and he's just going to keep punishing me forever on this diagonal. There's many options here. Knight f4 looks good. Pawn h3 looks good. What's the most forcing move? Pawn h3 here, check, there, check, there. Yeah, I mean, just as an example to how much of a catastrophe this would be if I allow knight at e2 check. So king a5 is a big move there for Jeffrey. He probably would have gone on to win the game, I would imagine. Well, at least it would have been a mad time scramble if I didn't take the queen and played some soppy move like bishop at d1 or bishop at b5, something like this. Ugh, yuck. Don't even want to look at that. So let's get on with the game. Queen takes a4, big turning point again. The point is here, knight c3 check covers the square e2 with tempo. So after the king moves, I now can afford to take the queen back with some very obvious decisive threats of queen dropping on b5. So, well, Jeffrey thought for a few seconds. His time is running very low to under 10 seconds. So if he doesn't have a forced mate, he's got to rely on flag pretty much to win the game. Oh, notice also this beautiful crisscross pattern defending with both rooks. So the rooks are covering the knight drop on h4 and also potential drops on g2. So let's just continue the sequence. This happened in the game. Check here, desperado, check, check, check. Oh, not a check, but there are no more good checks. So if he continues with the pawn, he's just going to run out of checks eventually. Yeah, and you can see all these important squares covered. He doesn't even have any knight check here, which again a Bughouse player will recognize instantly. So my pieces are just placed in the right squares to cover the threats. You can call it luck, you can call it foresight, whatever word you want to use. Let's see, where are we up to? Okay, so Jeffrey decided to defend with pawn at b5. Check here just as a useful multi-purpose move again. Defend and attack. Pawn drops there. Queen at c4. Now, there's an infamous game I played against Helm's Knight in the Lichess Crazyhouse World Championship qualifier, where I had 2 queens. I actually missed a forced mating 2 with a queen drop. Captured the queen, followed by a second queen drop. And I did see this a few moves later. I was a bit mad at myself for missing that. I was lucky to win the game in the end. But I decided I'm actually going to look at the number next to the queen to remind myself how many queens I have left. And here I have 2 queens, so why not make use of them? Queen at c4 is a good move. For obvious reasons he can't take, because the second queen comes into full effect on b5, so he has to drop something on c5. Oh, sorry, it has to be a rook, has to cover b5. And I'm just going to take it. And he's back to the desperado checks again. Pawn drop, take, knight drop. Funny here in the chess.com stream, Yasser covered and Danny covered the end of this. And Yasser thought Jeffrey had a queen in hand, but he only has a bishop. Even if he did have a queen in hand, I think king h1 still survives. But anyway, just some last second time scramble. We're down to 3 seconds each, so it's just check, desperado check, and a6. Now, obviously, if I had more than 0.5 seconds left on the clock, I would have instantaneously played the force mate with bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. There is even another nicer mate with bishop takes and queen at c5, no matter what follows. But I know Jeffrey is an extremely fast young player with the mouse, and I just, yeah, I'm not well known as a mouseketeer, as Yasser would say. So I just didn't want to lose on flag. I'm just resorting to random checks here, and I'm not pleased to win on time like this, but I mean, reasonably happy with the game overall. I did allow Jeffrey some sniffs to get back into the game, which were missed, but yeah, reasonably happy with the way I played overall. Okay, so we are on to 5 out of 6, round 7, black against my good buddy from Finland on the Discord server, chat server, M. Michael. So I've played him many times on various Bughouse websites. Haven't played him much in Crazyhouse. But I just, a bit like Vampelli, I just want to get some random position in the opening. It's a lot harder with black though, to make up some random position, so especially against e4. Okay, and it's really interesting that John Lee and I independently had ideas to play this opening, bishop c5, knight takes, and knight c6. And we both, you can check John Lee's stream as well, we both had this position at least once in the championship. And we did not collaborate on this, if that's what you're thinking. We decided to play this independently. It's very aggressive opening from black. It's a pawn sacrifice. It can even be a double pawn sacrifice in some lines. But the good thing is that it's not well known. It takes white out of their comfort zone. And if white wants to be aggressive, then black says, okay, well, I can be aggressive too. Queen h5, probably the most critical move. It's a sacrifice on f7 as well, but we'll look at that later. Knight h6. There's other moves possible, but this is quite okay. And if you haven't seen this position before, it does make a lot of sense to open up the diagonal here. Trade bishop for knight, hack away on g7, drop a knight on f6 back, that's the sort of idea. But I can cover this with bishop takes and bishop takes e5. And already I'm quite happy with the opening I got here. So defending the very important squares on g7 and f6, threatening to take on b2, and well, just asking white what he's going to do. There's a lot of threats in this position, and no obvious way to cover them all. Of course, he doesn't want to play bishop c1. That'd be a bit sad. So what happens? Knight at d3. Yes, not a bad move at all. Big threat here to take on e5 and start crashing through with bishop takes g7. So I'm not really happy with pawn at g6, but just couldn't see an obvious move over the board. Yeah, I'm still not even sure what to do. I haven't analysed this thoroughly. Queen e7, bishop f6 just looks too passive. He's gonna start dropping stuff. Take on b2, take on g7, maybe. Pawn d6. Nah, that drops g7. I don't know. I have to think about that more. Pawn at g6. Alright, so the option was to sacrifice the queen for 2 pieces like this. And not really sure whether I want to take on h6. You can drop a bishop here, a knight here. Not so happy with that. Maybe bishop at f6, but then take rook at g8. This is going into the Yakko zone. Yeah, Yakko. Let's not look any further. So I'm a little bit more comfortable with this decision. Taking on g7, drop on c1, making him waste a bishop. Not really sure what's happening here. Rook g8 played, but there were other options. Perhaps there were some more aggressive options to attack with. Trying to attack c2, knight b4, knight d4, knight at b4, knight at d4. Yeah, I don't know. Is this a decisive threat to take on c2? Follow up with other knight to d4. That's the point. Taking on d1 check. Yeah, it's just one of these crazy house games where you have to be very, very accurate, knowing when to attack, when to defend. He could choose to defend with. Yeah, it's crazy after knight d2 or knight c3 because you can throw away a rook, but then take this one. Do I have any real attack, or do I have to watch out for rook at g8? I don't know. I'm not going to get into this too much. It's a big mess. He can also defend with bishop d3, but here there's the option to trade knights and to go knight at f3, and I think this will work out well for black. And take back here on e5. Yeah, I think this should work out well. Alright, so where are we up to? So rook g8 played. Take there. Oh yeah, why did I sack a queen? Maybe I have to. And I mean, with threats of knight at f6 coming, I'd pretty much be forced to sack a queen anyway. I just didn't want to lose the initiative because, I mean, you saw the game against Plotkin. Once I lost the initiative, I just had zero chance to come back. So I thought, yeah, a reasonable practical decision to take here and take with check, because I can follow up with a few more checks. Go there, take the bishop. Trading queens, of course, doesn't help because I'm recapturing with check. And I would really like to have time for a knight drop on say b4 or a bishop drop on c4, something like this. Any of these squares just to provoke a queen exchange with check. So in the meantime, he doesn't have pawn here because I've got it covered. He doesn't have any obvious ways to attack. So he just grabs the material with pawn takes bishop. Makes sense. Knight at e5. Queen d2. Yeah, bishop drop is good. Other bishop drop is good. Alright, the most critical moment in the whole game is coming here. And at first sight, it looks like knight at c4 is the obvious move. And, you know, I just thought at the time that he's got to take me, expecting some continuation like this. Yeah, drop somewhere, I don't know, d4 or d2. I'll take his bishop, take back whatever way. I take on b2, check. And I can probably just sack a rook on d2 and I have a huge attack with knight c4 coming. I just completely overlooked that he doesn't have to take on d8. He can sacrifice the queen for 2 pieces with bishop takes b4. And oh dear, already I realized I messed up really bad. So the alternative here was to first take on c3. And this does make a massive difference. Because, yeah, whatever way he takes back, yeah, I don't know, let's say knight takes, here we go, I have the initiative. Knight c4 coming. Bishop e3 might be even better to clear this square here. For instance, knight at c4, bishop takes, knight takes. Where are you going, sunshine? No, I changed my mind. I want to play queen f2 first. And if he drops here, then knight at c4 is much more effective. Because I take there, there's the smothered mate themes with knight d2 coming. So he's got to drop at least a minor piece. What's he going to drop? A knight, a bishop, I don't know. Take the check, king b1, check here, or can I sack a queen? Is that mate? Feels like mate. I can't see how he's got enough pieces remaining to cause any huge difficulties against my king. Just to finish that sequence, we get something like this here. I don't have a knight to finish, but I can always just grab the rook. Oh, no, that should be decisive very, very soon. Alright, back to the game. I'm not sure whether that covers all the options, but feels good. Feels like mate, or at least enough to make him waste his attacking pieces. Alright, yeah, pawn takes bishop was another option, but then what do we have here? Bishop e3 anyway. Yeah, so this clears f2 for the knight. I can probably just play knight here next and pick up the rook if there's nothing better. There's also pawn at b2. Yeah, pawn at b2 to watch for. And I think he just can't allow this. So yeah, big opportunity missed. Let's come back to the game. Take it there. Now a queen is not really the piece I want in hand when you have to distract his miners. His miners are going to do a good job of defending very soon when he starts dropping bishops on c3 and knights on d4, stuff like this. So bishop takes pawn, a bit of a waste of a move. Probably should have just gone knight takes g4. I mean, at least I have a threat which he has to take somewhat seriously. Maybe bishop at g3 to follow. Can I sacrifice? Maybe bishop here, knight here, that sort of thing. But at least I'm picking up a pawn, which is something, making him defend. But yeah, I mean, this idea is just wrong. It's just plain wrong. I have a cheap one move threat on e1, which any beginner can see, and the pawn really is not serving any other purpose at the moment. So yeah, bad. Bishop e2, very, very simple move. Good way to keep the pieces in hand, to have maximum firepower when he starts his counterattack, which is going to be very soon because I've wasted so much stuff. Queen at g1. No, I didn't do queen at g1. I played c5. What am I doing? What is this move for? Why am I wasting a pawn? Maybe there's some trick. Yeah, I wanted to play some sort of sack here, followed by knight at c4. Something similar happened in the game. I don't even think it's working because he's got the back rank covered. There's some ideas of playing queen at g1. This probably also doesn't even work. Okay, I have rook at e1 coming. Maybe he has to take that. Is the rook in hand really doing anything? So, yeah, I have to defend. I have to play something like rook g8, don't I? Can I allow check here, king d7, take there. Oh dear. No. So I probably have to play rook g8 here, and suddenly he can choose to defend or attack. Oh, pawn on e7 looks good. Yeah. No. So maybe he can just take the pawn. Decided to throw in a check, c6, take it there. Yeah, this is just going absolutely nowhere. Knight at c4, and I realize this. What else to do but do a few more stupid checks. Let's see, bishop at d1. There's a very obvious mate in one. I have to tend to. Yeah, I just don't have many options here. Castle queenside. Not enough defenders, no blockers, so my king is on the run. Pawn check, take. There, he's doing all the obvious moves. He should have finished me off with a knight here, but he did a non-check move. Does that help me? Absolutely not. So take there, knight b3. By the way, of course you can't see the moves times, but he has a massive time advantage, and that's what decided the game. But pretty much any move would have won for him anyway. Knight b3, bishop here, knight there. He's just doing whatever check to flag me, but I have absolutely nothing. There's no rook for c1. So any move wins for white, literally any move. So he's just dropping stuff and I flagged. But yeah, well played to M. Michael, especially the queen sacrifice for 2 pieces. Yeah, I just didn't follow that up very well, and I could have arranged the move order in a much better way with just bishop takes bishop. Thanks for watching part 1 of the 2018 Chess.com Crazyhouse Championships. Part 2 is coming soon.